there's so many different aspects, to our social life. And again, let me once again say, hello, and this is the Citizens Community Forum. I'm Stephen Cummings, and our objective is always to have an engaging and interactive as well as civil discourse, and in so doing, help develop a culture of peace and understanding through constructive dialogue and, yes, citizens' participation. Our guests are persons who express views, opinions, and perspectives of their own, and sometimes may not necessarily be that of the FBN network, the Citizens Community Forum, or that of the host. And our topics are also wide-ranging. Discussions at times may be emotionally charged, but surely we can always find common ground and learn from each other, irrespective of our differing views. Well, while Trinidad and Tobago remains in the throes of a COVID-19 pandemic, it appears as though another pandemic which has plagued many societies continues to rear its head in Trinidad and Tobago, that of crime and violence. The stark reality is that our experience with what can be described as a social cancer remains very, very troubling. Not only to the ordinary citizen, but to state and public officials as well. Our very own Prime Minister, the Honorable Dr. Keith Rowley, speaking at a news conference earlier, called for some more attention to be paid to crime or treating with crime and violence. He said there should be a declaration of crime and violence as a public health emergency. Now, there are several questions. What does the Prime Minister really mean by a declaration of public health emergency when it comes to dealing with crime and violence? Does it mean measures that could be implemented bringing with it increased police or military presence as a national response? Does it mean a reformation of the society, starting with, for example, the home, in which children should be first nurtured into becoming good model citizens? What about the role of parents? Should they be made to pay the cost for their own delinquency in guiding children? And then there is the wider social and economic construct that of macroeconomic policies, some say, may have a direct impact on the human behavior, resulting in crime and violence. And then, again, should the church and faith-based organizations be playing a greater role in responding to this scourge? Well, at this time on the Citizens Community Forum, we want to have a closer look at the state of violence in Trinidad and Tobago. And our topic, responding to current societal violence in Trinidad and Tobago. And on the program, I have with me Mr. Martin George, no stranger to responding to social issues of this kind. Mr. George, welcome again to the Citizens Community Forum.
Yes, hi, good evening to you, Stephen, and good evening to your listeners and I guess your viewers on social media and Facebook. One of the things that I really appreciate in your intro is the way that you pitch the program as, trying to be part of the solution. Because the thing is, it's so easy for so many of us to just sit by and comment on the problems in society or, to castigate leaders and those in authority. But we have to also try to find solutions and to be part of working towards finding creative, constructive solutions to the societal problems which bedevil our nation. And I always appreciate whenever you extend the opportunity for me to try to be part of that solution.
And you're always welcome, Mr. George. I started out in my opening, crime and violence as a declaration of public health emergency. What do you think could be, could have been probably in the mind? You probably would not be able to get into the mind of the Prime Minister, but certainly you may have a perspective. I've been hearing lots of comments, a declaration of a public health emergency dealing with crime and violence. What do you think, the implications might be here, Mr. George?
The thing is, it's really something that I've been wrestling and struggling with to find the meaning, the reasoning, the rationale. And I must confess, as yet, I have not been able to find it. So I think the Prime Minister really is the one who will have to answer that question as to what he means by it, more so what will it do to solve the problems? Because in other words, is it that we simply, as a nation, agree that yes, we make a declaration. Okay, so we make the declaration, then what?
What's next? Yeah.
This is the point, and this is where I think even when reporters pressed him on the issue on Saturday, he appeared oblique and obscure, and I think he descended into obfuscation. On the topic. So I think he's the one who will have to provide clarity on it, because I'm not sure what it means, and I'm even less clear as to how that is going to present itself as a solution to the crime problems besetting the nation at this time.
Well, I'm sure, Mr. George, he is going to be pressed further at another opportunity to explain and expand, extrapolate further on that. But, certainly, when we think of a response in a general sense, to crime and violence, what comes to mind automatically is, this a possible increase in police or military presence as a national response. But then again, we have seen in societies where that has not really been, a solution to crime and violence in any society by itself, as a standalone.
If we use our neighboring country, Jamaica, as an example, we have seen, unfortunately, the more they ratchet up the militarization of the Jamaican police force, the more you see the response from the criminal element, in that they also ratchet up their arms and ammunition to try to match force. I mean, it has reached the stage where at times in Jamaica, the police, they use tanks. If you remember when they were trying to capture Dudus,
yes,
who had barricaded himself.
Yes.
Right, in his community. I mean, they went in there with tanks, and still that is not how they were able to get him. He was eventually caught when he was found fleeing in the car of a pastor dressed as a woman, but the point is the ratcheting up of the militarization element of the police service. I am not sure that has proven to be the solution in any society. So we need really to also look at the holistic picture, the bigger picture, and see where we can try to reach the hearts and minds of citizens, so that you have a willingness to basically change the way.
Be part of the solution.
That's right. Rather than you feel that, okay, so I will come down with a heavier hand, because you look at what happened today. I mean, that was direct response to what the citizens saw as the heavy hand of the police in those 3 young men in that vehicle, because the circumstances do appear curious. Because when you hear the police saying, they heard an explosion and they thought that they had come under fire. Now, I mean, come on. You are dealing with this every day. You must know whether you're under fire or not, right? You have, if you have no evidence of any bullet holes or bullets being fired in your direction or anything, so then it raises questions as well. What was this supposed explosion, and what made you think that you were under fire? And was it one isolated explosion, and then you returned a hail of bullets? If you understand me,
yes.
Or was several explosions you heard? But I mean, from the initial reports I saw, they said they heard an explosion, so that sounds like it's one. So I mean, these are the things that I think would really now excite the suspicion of the ordinary citizen, and then make you feel, that look, something is amiss. And then when you couple that with the report from the PCA, which came out just last week, so the point is, it's fresh in the minds of the citizenry, and I mean, the PCA made very damning comments about the behavior and conduct of the police service and the police officers. In fact, going so far as to suggest that they misled the
police commissioner.
Misled the commissioner of police, I mean, so then if they could mislead the commissioner of police, then the ordinary citizen will basically be asking, well, who is we? They could try to fool us every day. If you understand me, if one were to use the colloquial,
It's very, very frightening, scenario, Mr. George. And when we see these things happening, these social issues, they have a way of just, catching on in so many different, colors and shades and what have you. But certainly, does this really, as we're looking at all of these, all of these areas, I'm also wondering whether, this. What the Prime Minister is probably hinting at, does it mean a reformation of the society, starting with, let's say, the home within which children should be, as I said, should be first nurtured into becoming good model citizens? Because if you have strong family life, it stands to reason that you have a better chance of having a better society.
Well, as I said, I don't know. And I mean, the point is, Stephen, we can sit here and speculate until the cows come home. And I really don't think there's any useful purpose to be served in such type of speculation. I think we need to call upon the Prime Minister to give the clarity as to what he really means.
Right, and as I said, I'm sure that we're going to have another opportunity to press him further on this. And then again, Mr. George, there's the wider social and economic construct, of that, what I referred to earlier on as the macroeconomic, status of any country. Some say may have a direct impact on human behavior, resulting in crime and violence. So that you have, for example, rising food prices, you have rising, levels of unemployment, you have social displacement, you have, things like, discrimination within the workplace. All these are social issues that I suppose, the people who study the psychology and the sociology of a society would tell you should certainly would have a bearing on how we behave as human beings.
Yes, indeed. I mean, and the fact of the matter is that unless we also incorporate that as part of our, as I say, holistic approach to the solution, then I think we're only basically outing fires. That's all we're really doing, without actually going to the source to be able to say, well, look, hey, should we try to avoid starting the fire in the first place, rather than be calling in the fire brigade each time to try and put out the fire.
Yes, again, a very, very interesting, area there again, and one that we can't, be, as you said, we can't be just outing fires every Monday morning, and you referenced the situation in Jamaica. I mean, if we look at the news coming out of Jamaica, almost every month, and I'm being conservative here, almost every month within the last several months, we've had the Prime Minister having to force and to call curfews and states of emergency in different areas, and again we're seeing where the violence continues. So certainly, Mr. George, again, it can't be a solution.
Exactly. And the fact of the matter is that, because of the heavily tourist economy in Jamaica, they try to keep these things quiet, but the fact,
as well as Barbados. Barbados is another example.
Barbados is a prime example of trying to keep things under wraps so that you don't realize that there is a level of crime and violence even in that society. But of course, the Bajans are always very tight-lipped about it because they know that it impacts upon their tourist economy. So therefore, they try to keep everything, under the radar and under wraps. But you saw, even for instance, on their economy, which Bajans are always so proud of and love to beat their chest about it. You saw one of their leading economists and lecturers last week. He gave a startling expose where he said that, look, the path that Barbados is on is unsustainable in terms of their commitment to debt servicing to the IMF. The rate at which the Mia Mottley government has committed the island, he says that they're not going to be able to meet the debt servicing ratios that they have set for themselves. So, the fact of the matter is that, while we love to complain in Trinidad and Tobago and, basically make it look like the sky is falling and that we are, facing the worst possible scenarios in TNT. We need to understand from a broader perspective that look, sometimes it's not always as bad as we like to make it out to be. But then, on the other hand, it doesn't mean that we ought to get complacent to think that, look, we are in a good place. We are not. The reality is that we are not. But the fact of the matter is that we must not always think of it in a worst case scenario that we are at the bottom of the barrel, because we also are not.
And I know also, Mr. George, well, before we continue, we just want to remind our listeners that this is the Citizens Community Forum. Stephen Cummings speaking with Mr. Martin George, and our topic responding to current societal violence in Trinidad and Tobago. Mr. George, I know that you also represent the business interest in Tobago, and I did have a listen at an earlier, comment, a statement that you made, relative to how this issue of crime, has been affecting the economy. But certainly, we will have there's this crisis of economic crisis where we have, when we talk about confidence and investor confidence, how much of this, which has been happening in Trinidad and Tobago, from your viewpoint, has been impacting on Tobago as an island, quite apart from Trinidad?
Well, the thing is, when one looks at it in terms of the crime situation in Tobago, it clearly is not as bad as it is in Trinidad, but per capita, I always say we have to look at it from that perspective. It is not acceptable in the sense that there are too many illegal guns, too many illegal, drugs, and, too much acts of violence that occur in a small island as Tobago. That's why I always call upon the police service. I always call upon the commissioner of police and challenge them to say, hey, listen, if it's one division in the entire of Trinidad and Tobago, in all of Trinidad and Tobago, that you should be able to have zipped up, locked down and, made as a safe space. It ought to be Tobago. It's just 116 square miles. It's the smallest division in the entire police service. It's an island. You have it surrounded by water, so therefore there's no excuse for them not being able to do so.
Well, I know that you have always championed Tobago first. That's a term that stuck with me in our previous discussion. Even when we were talking about, treating with the vaccination and ensuring that the island, gets that kind of priority. But, that's for another topic. But but as we continue our discussion, going forward, Mr. George, there's also been, this view that that we are a nation of just people who maybe in some instances have lost national pride. And I've heard the accusations coming from some quarters. There was an old there was an old saying that that we need to really be thinking about country first, instead of me as an individual, so that you think of country first. And I think going back to some of those values, and if we were to focus on some of those values, I'm wondering, apart from just maybe having a better society, I'm wondering how difficult is it for us to have a return to some of those old values that we once knew.
Well, I mean, the fact of the matter is that takes an all-of-country approach. It can't just be the government responsible for that. But the point is they must take the lead. And thus far, we've not seen them really take the lead, apart from mouthing convenient phrases and catch slogans and catchwords that they've used. But they need to take the lead in that. And then now you partner with all arms of civil society, with your churches, your faith leaders. You partner with the community groups. You partner with the those who are doing social outreach, those who have, missions, to visit the prisons, whatever. You try to coordinate all of these so that you start reaching back into the communities, reaching back into the families, reaching back into the homes, and therefore reaching the individuals. Because let me tell you, unless you are able to reach the spirits, the souls, the hearts, the minds of individual persons, you are not going to effect societal change. We will just be talking about it basically like, from an esoteric and a perspective where it's just theoretical rather than something that has practical effect. And that's what we need to do. But the problem with that, Stephen, and the challenge with that is a long-term, very arduous and tedious road to walk. And thus far, none of our governments seem willing to take that road, because first of all, if you look at a 5-year term, then you are certainly not going to get the credit for it, because it's not going to be completed during your 5-year term, if you understand. So even if you embark upon it, and they're all about getting the credit and trying to win the next election. So therefore, they don't plan beyond 5 years, if you understand. So part of their programs, they want to see the results that they could show the public and say, hey, listen, vote for me again, because this is what I have done. So they don't want a 20 or 30-year plan that, will eventually bring about the deep transformation of the society that we need, because they are not able to claim the credit for it.
And we understand too, Mr. George, that, governments are supposed to be about continuum, continuing from where the other previous would have left off, and especially those positives, that would have been focused on. But, what you're saying there, Mr. George, where you have this 5-year vision or focus by generally, by administrations, sounds to me that we could be in a very bad place, because if we have administrators, political or otherwise, who are bent on, let's say, a 5-year stint, as it were, and we're certainly in a very bad place, Mr. George.
Well, the fact of the matter is that we have a scenario where our leaders are not on that page, they are not at that point. So that's why programs such as this, Stephen, where we elevate the level of discussion, we open the minds and hearts of the public so that they can see that, hey, listen, there are bigger issues here. There are, bigger pictures than the partisan politics and the back and forth and the bickering that we see in the parliament. And therefore, they have to call upon our leaders to say, hey, listen, we want you to deal with national issues from a national perspective, which would then mean you put aside the petty,
partisan politics, yes.
Right. So that's why programs such as this are important.
And as you mentioned, the Parliament, Mr. George, I quite often, well, of course, the business for which I'm into, I have to be monitoring, the Parliament as well, as I do with so many other areas. And sometimes you get a sense that there's a kind of violence that happens within the Parliament as well, Mr. Jordan. I'll tell you what I mean by that. You have, this kind of strong adversarial type of, we saw it, in months gone by, between the opposition and the government. You have constant walkouts. You have members even speaking, standing up and speaking over the Speaker of the House. Is that a form of violence, or am I stretching that a little too far, Mr. George?
Well, it may not be violence, but it certainly is inappropriate and unacceptable societal behavior. And when that comes from our leaders, you ask yourself, what do you expect?
And that's what I was getting to
do. Yes. So therefore, when you see the videos circulating of children fighting in school, they are just expressing in their own way the same type of discord and disrespect that they see from our leaders.
And
You know,
that's what I was
they
coming
wouldn't
to.
do it in stage in a walkout, but they may say, well, look, they pelt a cuff or pelt a kick, you know, at somebody. So in a way, it equates and it parallels just what you're saying, that in its own way, it, you know, it feeds the culture of violence and the culture of disrespect for one another, disrespect for authority, disregard for persons, and disregard for our fellow men.
Right, and that's the point that I was getting to, because if we have a particular portrayal of that kind of behavior, even at our parliament level, certainly our children, society, and looking on, and we need to, there's something that we need to take note of as well. And we just want to remind our listeners that this is the Citizens Community Forum. I'm Stephen Cummings, and I'm speaking with Mr. Martin George. Our topic: responding to current societal violence in Trinidad and Tobago. How do we stem this flow? Trinidad and Tobago is not unique to crime and violence, as I mentioned in my opening. It has continues to be a scourge. But how do we come to a place of treating and stemming this, in the best interest of public safety? Mr. George, we also here in Trinidad and Tobago follow international, we look at what's happening in other countries by way of even our court system. And you have been in the business of at the courts for quite some time, being an attorney as well. You've seen different sides of the society, even and when we look at persons who would have been brought before the court to answer charges. And so part of the system I'm also hearing is that you have a problem at the judiciary. You have a problem where you have cases that cases that pile up for many years. People have the sense that that justice is not being done as it's supposed to. Could that be part of the problem as well? Not knocking, we're not coming against what the judiciary is about or has to do as a responsible body, but I'm saying that there is a perception that there is an issue there that also has to be dealt with.
There certainly is, and this cannot be denied. In fact, if we listen to the Chief Justice at his annual review that he gives every year for the opening of the law term, he himself highlights the problem of the backlog and the delays in the system. Of course, they are trying creative and innovative ways to tackle it. The Civil Proceedings Rules 1998 was one way in which they have sought to do so. Then you have the Criminal Proceedings Rules, which was also brought on board, and that's another way that they've tried to do so. Then you've had the Family Court Rules, then you've had the creation of the Family Court Division as a separate division. So there are several initiatives which have been put on stream. You've had the Children's Court, so
judge only trial, yes, yeah.
Alleviate the backlog. But the fact of the matter is that it's not yet resolved. You have scenarios where the DPP himself keeps complaining about his office being understaffed, under-resourced, underfunded. In fact, up to recently, I think last week, he made the same complaints in relation to talking about the delays in the Piaco Airport 1 case, which is running almost 20 years now without conclusion, without even reaching the High Court level for trial. Almost 20 years, and that's Piaco 1. From what I understand, there's Piaco 2, Piaco 3, and
possible
Piaco
4.
4,
Yes.
all waiting in the wings. So can you imagine if the first slew of cases have not yet even reached the High Court after almost 20 years? What is going to happen with the others? It's totally unacceptable. And then, of course, this has a knock-on effect on all other criminal matters, because the system just gets slowly clogged as things grind to a halt. And therefore now those who are in the system, caught in this criminal justice system, they feel, well, hey, it's a case of justice delayed being justice denied.
Again, very, very important area there. And we just want to remind our listeners this is the Citizens Community Forum. I'm Stephen Cummings, and I'm speaking with Mr. Martin George. Our topic at this time, responding to current societal violence in Trinidad and Tobago. Mr. George, we have to take a short break now, and when we come back, we will continue the discussion.
Sure.
The University of the West Indies has the capacity to generate its own funding, or at least part funding. Is that what I'm getting from you?
Yes, Stephen, thank you very kindly. You have put it in a precise language. If they have been doing that, it is to a minuscule extent.
Somebody tried to ask me, so what do you want? I said, brother, let me do good. Sometimes, even as a person, you ain't sure what you want, but you're absolutely sure what you don't want. And workers are absolutely certain that this 2% that is on offer is an insult.
2% over an 8-year period and tell your boy or God who that things are hard. No. Are we living in a different Trinidad and Tobago? And that is what we have to discuss.
Discussion on health, leadership, governance, crime, education, and social justice. Every Wednesday, 8 to 9 p.m., the Citizens Community Forum. Your host, Stephen Cummings. And welcome back to the Citizens Community Forum. I'm Stephen Cummings. This time we are talking responding on our topic, responding to current societal violence in Trinidad and Tobago. I have with me Mr. Martin George on the program for yet another time. Mr. George, welcome back.
Hi, yes, thank you.
I wanted to sort of, to put a question to you regarding this issue of firearms, illegal firearms being used. Now, in the committal, in the commission of crime, I've heard the commissioner, police commissioner, ever so often talk about, and it's, it's you see it and you read about it, that weapons, guns, illegal guns being that choice, that weapon of choice. Are you satisfied with the current level of penalties associated with possession of an illegal firearm in Trinidad and Tobago?
Well, the thing is, you see, Stephen, I think just even that question, to my mind, approaches it from the wrong end. If we're talking about illegal firearms, instead of looking at the end user, we need to attack it at the source. Where are they coming from? Where are they being imported from? Where are they landing? Where are the ports of entry? Who are the persons? Because it cannot be the little man on the street or the little boy on the street, the teenager who you see, in these videos, toting these big, long AK-47, rifles, assault rifles, or the Uzis, they are not the ones who are importing these guns. They are not the ones bringing them through customs, passing them through customs. They are not the ones who bring in a container load of either chicken or meat or some other commodity, and you have a stash of guns inside. It's not these youths on the street. So you see, it's very easy as a society to, paint these youths, as the problem. They are simply the end product of a much bigger societal problem that we all keep turning a blind eye to. It's the same thing with the illegal drugs. Those little young boys who might be, pushing a 10-piece or pushing the little bag of cocaine on the streets, they are not the ones who are importing it. And until we as a society get serious about trying to deal with these things at the source, then we are only taking a convenient and I think an escapist route by saying, well, look, you see, it's these little boys that you're seeing portrayed in the newspaper, on the television, in the media. They are the ones, they are the problem. They are not the problem. They are the end product of a bigger problem. And of course, yes, they are cogs in the wheel of the overall societal and national problem. But the bigger picture would always be, who are the persons, the individuals that are importing and bringing these illegal items into the country. And that's what we need to start focusing on, Stephen. So, I mean, sorry for not answering your question, but I really think that it is misdirected and misguided, because our focus as a nation needs to turn away from, because listen, we will continue blaming and castigating these little black boys or the little boys on the street who, you see paraded before the courts. Because let me tell you, you lock up 10 and 20 more spring up in their place.
I hear you.
You kill 10, 15 more come up. So therefore, that is not solving the problem. Let us be realistic. Let us be mature. Let us be honest with each other and honest with ourselves, and recognize that, hey, listen, yes, we have to deal with them because they are participating as end users in part of a bigger, multi-headed hydra that is bigger than society. But the fact of the matter is, you need to get to the root, to the source of it, and attack it there. And that's where we need to focus our energies.
Right, and I hear your point there too, Mr. George. You're not saying that there should be the slap on the wrist, for the user. But certainly, but going back again, you talked about the source. I've been hearing, and the society has been hearing for many decades about this Mr. Big. I think it was our former Prime Minister who talked about Mr. Big, and there appears to be this kind of elusive situation where it's always difficult to get at the big fish, and that appears to be a challenge as well, Mr. George, if we have to really get at the source. And I think that even within the society of Trinidad and Tobago, there are many people who know who this Mr. Big is, and may not see the need to be part of the solution. So again, we do have a challenge in our society, which lends itself again to violence and crime in the society.
And that is so correct. But the fact of the matter is that we must not, as a result, throw our hands up in the air and say, well, okay, since it has proven difficult or challenging to get to the main players, let's then vilify and castigate and, increase the sentences to, lock up these little boys longer, and keep them in behind bars longer. Because as I said, you put 20 behind bars and 30 will spring up in their place. If you understand me, it's a never-ending procession. If you think of it, think back, Stephen. I mean, our history is littered with so many gang leaders who were, the big men of the day, so to speak, in their little communities. And you had people like Fresh, you had RoboCop, you had so many of them.
Yeah, we had our fair share of Dudas Cooks. Yeah, I know.
That's right. And you always have persons replacing them. So therefore, clearly, they are not the main players behind the scenes. They are the expendables in the entire scenario. They are the expendables. Don't care how big in their little community they may think they are. They are the expendables, because clearly you have bigger players behind the scenes, nameless, faceless ones, who are the ones really the masterminds behind the operations. And let me tell you, in many cases, some of them are known, but the point is, you have a cozy situation between some of them and high police authorities, high government officials. So therefore, they remain forever in the shadows, and they continue their operations while we preach and we pray and we pontificate about the scourge of these youths and the violence and crime that the youths are perpetrating. But the point is, the youths are being fueled and resourced and outfitted by persons in jackets and ties and in suits and briefcases.
Well, I don't think we have too many briefcases. Now they're more like iPads and cell phones. Because why I mentioned that, Mr. George, we have moved the art of I'm not sure if I should, should describe, crime as an art. That's probably a wrong way of putting it. But the violence and has moved, from one level to the next. We're now talking about cybercrime. There's the internet, and there's so many different different layers now. Which in itself presents its own challenge. To societies such as us in Trinidad and Tobago as well.
Yes, indeed. And the point is, Stephen, while we lament the enormity of the problem, we must never despair on the possibility of finding and working towards solutions.
Right. So again, we have to be able to have this whole of society approach. This is what I'm getting from you, that everyone in Trinidad and Tobago, in a society as ours, we do have a role to play. And I mentioned a couple of those when in my opening, and again, I've always like to focus on that family unit, because I believe that that the way that we are educated as a society, the way that we are socialized as a society, have a great bearing on the kind of citizen that we produce.
And that is so true, Stephen. That is exactly the issue here. Because, the fact of the matter is, we have clients who, they live in some of these, challenging areas, some of these depressed societal areas. And because of the way they conduct themselves, because of the way they bring up their children, it is clear that their children will never be involved in any of those activities because of the training they get in the home. And that is always so important for us to understand and remember, because, many times you see, like for instance, people will celebrate and hail the success of, someone who, graduated from, say, Success Lab until school, and then, turn out to become a doctor, an attorney, whatever. But the point is that starts in the home. That didn't happen by magic. That didn't happen overnight. And that's what we need to understand. So in other words, it's that training, that conditioning of your mind, your heart, your soul, your spirit, that acknowledgement that, hey, listen, you have a role to play in society. You are called here for a higher purpose, a greater good. That when you instill that in a child from small and you keep nurturing and feeding that, then that's the type of adult you will produce.
Yes, it sets the basis and the foundation for, as I said, good model citizens.
And you see, the reality is that we have to start training our children from young, training their minds and hearts by being good exemplars ourselves. If you understand me,
yes.
Right? So it's not just a matter of telling them what they should do. We also have to lead by example so they can model themselves after us.
And when we look at Trinidad and Tobago as well, Mr. George, and we just want to remind our listeners and our viewers that this is the Citizens Community Forum. I'm Stephen Cummings. I'm speaking with Mr. Martin George. He's on the program this evening. Trinidad and Tobago as a society, we have known of initiatives, lots of initiatives by the state. We've had the youth camps. We've had, initiatives such as the MyLats and, so many different programs that have come through the years, crossing, spanning different administration. And I'm wondering, where is the disconnect? Because we are linking our discussion now to this response, to current societal violence in Trinidad and Tobago. And I believe that once you have hands and minds that are occupied into things that are of value, you have very little opportunity, or there's very little room, to get into antisocial and violent type activities. And I'm wondering, where is the disconnect between all these different social programs, Mr. George, that we've had over the years, that we still have? I'm struggling in my mind to find out whether those programs have not really, been constructed in a way to really give that kind of impetus and to create that kind of social harmony You know, has there been a displacement somewhere? Is that something has gone wrong with these social programs? We have so many of them.
Well, the thing is, first of all, I don't think we've ever done a good job of selling them to the nation. Let's start with that. You know, we have not done so. We still are at the stage where, you know, for instance, the society seems to favor the strict academic performance over, for instance,
Skills
other
development, yes,
skills.
and
Technical
vocational
vocational skills are not given priority. They are not given any sense of importance or relevance, if you understand me. So we still look down on those as, you know, menial jobs and, you know, things that you do when you can't do anything else, if you understand me.
or he's just a carpenter, or he's just
Right.
yeah.
Yes. So I think but again, you see, this is where good leadership comes about, because I'll tell you something. In many countries in Europe, say for instance, they actually have such specialized schools for these arts and crafts that, first of all, it's difficult to even get in. The training is rigorous and intense. When you graduate, you are a qualified, certified professional. You charge top dollar for your services, and you are a highly respected member of society. Because listen, if you are a baker and you are a certified, qualified baker, people respect you, because the point is, when you do your art, your craft, and your baking, and you produce your baked goods and your pastries and your, you know, then people are willing to pay top dollar for it. If you are a master craftsman, as a plumber,
Yes.
you pay top dollar for your services, because you are certified, qualified, and you are someone whom they respect. But the point is, we tend to take a very haphazard and almost, if I am permitted to use the colloquial, a vai sort of approach to these things. So we have these programs in fits and starts. You start up in the trade schools, then you close them down. You don't have materials, you don't have resources, you know. So the point is, nobody takes it seriously. You had done John Donaldson Technical Institute, which produced quite a few very excellent members of society.
Coming out of,
You close that down, you know. You had so many other programs, even the MyLat. I'm not even sure if that is functioning anymore. From what I understand, that was also a very good program. So we have not, as a society, really taken the seriousness in terms of treating with these programs and being able to sell it to our young people, to say, hey, listen, this is really a good, viable alternative, a good, viable option for you as a career, as a life choice. So therefore, what are they now faced with? You are not able to make it in the academic world. In the world of academia, you fall through the cracks, starting with the SEA, then of course your performance in Form 1, Form 2, by Form 3, you are disenchanted with the purely academic system, because you are struggling. You are struggling. You are swimming against the tide. You probably don't have the home support. You don't have the the family support. You don't have the guidance, the training. So therefore, you feel lost in that world. That world is an alien world to you. So therefore, you don't fit in. You don't see a future. You don't see a pathway for yourself.
Right. And,
so therefore, no, let me finish, please, Stephen. It's very important to develop this point.
Sure.
So therefore, you then say, well, okay, well, what are my options? You start to want to stay away from school. You might end up, spending some time liming on the streets. Then you start talking with guys there. Then they start speaking about their experiences and what they're doing, and they tell you, well, hey, listen, man, it's easy, what we do, you sell this, you get that amount of money, and you think, well, hey, listen, I could do that, I could try, and that's where it begins. That's where the problem starts. I remember an executive of TSTT who, gave us a story at Crime Stoppers when, he came to, have a discussion with us. He said, he decided that on his own that he's going to do an outreach up in the, hills of Laventille. So he went up there and, he was speaking to some young men, and he was telling them, he was saying, look, guys, if you work hard, you will eventually be able to become a good corporate executive such as myself. And, he gave them an example. Even he said, that he's making $36,000 a month and, they could aspire to that, so he was trying from that approach.
Yes.
And one of the young men told him, he said, listen, I could make that in 2 weeks.
So there was a rebuttal. Yes, go ahead.
What you could tell me now. And he said at that point he really didn't have any answer for it. So the reality is that they are presented with what appears to be a more attractive option. Of course, we know that it's fleeting, it's illusory, it does not last. You probably end up dying from lead poisoning, from bullets, And the fact of the matter is that it's a fast and furious lifestyle that does not have any sustainable future. But the point is, at that time, given the choices that this young man might be faced with, it does appear to be the more attractive option. So we need to understand, Stephen, you see, we need to be realistic and get to the root of the problem and understand why our society is this way.
The way that is it.
Yes.
Right. Very important. And I'm happy that you were able to, to expand on that, because, I was going to mention, the very root, how do we, how do we get, how have we gotten here? And you've just explained that that there is this, there's this transition from, someone who would have maybe fallen out of the cracks within the school system, within the education system, unable to cope with the academics, and may have found it very easy, to go onto the other side again, getting into the area of crime and violence. So that I'm happy that you were able to lay that out, so that persons can get a better understanding, or again, be given another perspective as to how, one of the ways that we have gotten here as a society, as we talk about, crime and violence in Trinidad and Tobago. And we just want to remind our listeners that this is the Citizens Community Forum. I'm Stephen Cummings, and I'm speaking with Mr. Martin George. Mr. George, we have just a few minutes again before we close the program. And as per usual, I always like to end the program with, giving you an opportunity and giving our guests an opportunity to just to give us some closing, some wrap-up comments. We have heard what the Prime Minister said, and you, as well as myself, I'm still struggling to to define, to understand exactly what the Prime Minister means. But of course, as I said before, we will have an opportunity to press him further at another opportunity to clarify and to elucidate a little more on what he means by, declaring crime and violence as a public health emergency. Mr. George, your closing remarks.
No, well, what I would say, Stephen, is that, I certainly urge our listeners to not despair. The fact of the matter is that I always optimistic, and I always, have that faith and strength of conviction that, look, we will find a way out of it. You think of the Israelites who were wandering in the desert for 40 years, thinking that they will never get out, and they were still able to see the promised land eventually. So I think that we still are able to find our way to the promised land, but we must all pull together, and we must all, with a common voice, call upon our leaders, those in authority, to do the right thing. And we must not facilitate or mollycoddle them when they want to use us as pawns in their political games and their political one-upmanship. We must not facilitate or mollycoddle them when they want to engage in the political bickering, which simply is it's Russian roulette, because the point is, when one party is in government, they accuse the other of everything. Then when the roles are reversed, you have a reversal of accusations. We have to put a stop to that. We have to break that cycle, and we have to understand that we need to put in place leaders who are willing to get back down to basics, to meet and treat with the people, and understand that we have to start rebuilding this nation and this society, one community at a time, one village at a time, one home at a time, one family at a time, and one individual at a time, all as a nation under God and guided by His Spirit and His will, so that we will understand that we are here for a higher purpose and we are destined to fulfill that.
All right, Mr. George, we have to leave it there at the moment. And as you know, I want to thank you again for taking the time to sit with us. And it has been a while, you know, before I was trying to reach you, you know, to have this discussion. And I'm so happy that you are able to sit with us this time. But again, you know, we have to continue the discussion, because, you know, our social issues, we are the ones, you know, who would have to fix and find the solutions to our you know, unique situations here in Trinidad and Tobago. Once again, it has been a pleasure having you on the program, and thank you so much again for taking the time.
You're most welcome, and good evening to you, and good evening Trinidad and Tobago, and good evening to your listeners and viewers.
Mr. Martin George there, talking with me on the Citizens Community Forum. Our topic, responding to current societal violence in Trinidad and Tobago. Well, that's our program for this evening. I'm Stephen Cummings. See you next Wednesday. It was a famous poet who once said, "They came for the Jews, and I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. Then they came for the communists, and I did not speak out because I was not a communist. And then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak for me." Words there from famous poet Martin Niemöller, 1892 to 1984.